She was this gun-toting, whiskey-drinking broad.
The super epic fucking broad.
She was a pioneer in the industry.
She's also so famous and so controversial.
So controversial.
So she's kind of a big fucking deal.
Her story is so incredible. She belongs on this podcast because she's a broad you should know. Hello and welcome to Broads You Should Know, the podcast about amazing and noteworthy women from history. I'm Sarah Gorski, and I, audience, am so excited to introduce you to one of my very best friends in the entire world, a friend from college at Illinois Wesleyan University, Earl T. Kim.
Hello,
Earl,
everyone.
who are you?
Hi. My name is Earl T. Kim. I am an actor, voice actor, director, storyteller, choreographer, person.
Didn't you
who
just
does
do like a
things,
really big famous video game?
Oh yeah. Most, I guess, notably, I play the role of Norio in the PlayStation game Ghost of Tsushima.
What?
So if there are any gamers out there, yeah, that's me. I'm the voice and the face and the body, adi. I do it all.
Earl, I am so excited that you are with us today. And obviously, audience, you're listening, and so you can't see his face, but and you can't tell that my friend Earl is Korean. And I realized when I invited him and he said yes, which I was so excited about, I realized, audience, we haven't even done a single Korean broad yet, and I'm so embarrassed. So today, Earl, I am bringing a Korean broad for us to talk about.
Oh yes. Oh, there's a lot of great
There
Korean
are
broads out
so
there.
many.
I don't know why I don't know when I say Korean broad, I just immediately slip into an Australian accent. Oh, the Korean
It's
broads.
the word broad, right? That is the word broad makes you somehow think of Australia.
Bro, I think broad is very. There's something about these broads, but it's not even like I don't know. I don't think a lot of Australians use that as a female term. Like it's then at the same time like I feel like a New Yorker, like a bunch of broad. I don't know, like it's just such a great like oldie timey. Like I need a cigar and a monocle, and then I need to be
Disrespect that. Well, you might be on the wrong podcast if you're here to disrespect women.
No, absolutely not.
I know he's just
Kidding.
kidding. He's just
Jokes.
kidding. He's
Take
a
that out.
super ally and feminist. Would you consider yourself a feminist?
Oh fucking yeah! I would say that I am a
Radical. He might be more
feminist.
radical than me even. Although I've gotten really saucy lately, so I might have feel like I'm radical.
Yes.
Too. Anyway, Earl, I'm here to bring you today Yu Gwan-sun. Have you heard of her?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. She is a hero. She is a Korean folk hero. Like she's risen to like she's not just like she was an actual person, she's a real person. She existed. But then like she like has come to sort of embody this like the spirit of an independent, youthful, free-thinking Korea.
That is my understanding as well after all my research.
I'm really excited because I feel like she's also her story is incredibly.
Don't give it away. Okay, don't give it away. Don't give it away.
Wonderful, like
I'm
not going to give it away, but like, yeah, I'm just so excited that we're talking about her.
She is awesome. She came up in my, I like literally just Googled amazing Korean women and got this huge list. Audience, did you know you can do that? You can just Google like a country and amazing women, and this like and lists of amazing women show up.
And my mom shows up. My mom's on that list.
Oh snap! Wow. Maybe your mom. Do you think your mom will listen to the podcast?
Probably not, but maybe I'll tell her to. If I'm like, Mom, I talk about you on the podcast, she'll be like, No, I'm definitely.
My mom wasn't a listener, but recently she became one. But I don't think she listens to every episode.
Organic.
But when she does, she texts me about it, and she texts me about how much she likes the women and how she wants to start a podcast with me now. So.
Oh, adorable.
Anyway, back to Yu Gwan-sun. I know I love her
mom,
too. She always asks about you.
I'm sorry. Shout out.
Let's talk about Yu Gwan-sun. So Ryu
Yes.
was born on December 16th, 1902 in okay, I'm trying
Mhm.
these Korean names, audience, and Earl might have to fix them because he actually does speak Korean.
I might
So she was
cackle.
born in Byongchang. Byongchang.
Pyeongchang.
Ah, I was close.
Do you remember? It's where do you remember the what do you call it? What do you call it? The Olympics.
Yes.
Do you remember? Do you remember those? Do you remember those when they were sorry? They were done
No,
in
I don't.
Korea.
I
Do you?
don't.
No. Sorry. This is like 20.
I
This is
can't
like
remember what I did
20.
yesterday, Earl. I don't remember the Korean Olympics.
I know. It was like 2018. It wasn't too long
Anyway,
ago.
well,
But
so say it
anyways.
again for me.
Oh no. Okay. Sorry. She was in
Oh,
Chungcheon.
yeah, Chungcheong Province.
She's
Chungcheong Province.
yeah. Chungcheon. Yeah,
And
Chungcheon.
so Byongchang is the city she was born in, right? Is that how you said it? Anyway. Anyway, it's a bigger city.
Yeah.
It's near the bigger city of Cheonan. Cheonan? Cheonan.
Cheonan.
It's near the bigger city of Cheonan
Yes.
and about 53 miles south of Seoul in the South Cheongcheong province.
Dang, these are some specific coordinates. You're I love 53 miles south.
Well, I have
You'll be
to
able to
like
find
I like to put in a
the
reference to
town.
one of the really big cities that everybody knows about, so we get like some sort of
That's good.
relative
No.
geography. Since
No.
we're listening to podcasts and we're not looking at
Exactly.
maps right now, so like 50 miles south of
It's true.
Seoul. She's the second daughter of 5 children. And all of the sources that I found specifically mentioned, they go out of their way to specifically mention that they were a Christian family. Um,
Yeah. So what you should know is that Christianity is incredibly rare at this time in
oh.
Korea. Um, Christianity is incredibly rare pretty much everywhere. I mean, less rare in Japan because of a lot of missionary work that was happening since like the 16 or
Mm.
1700s. But at least in Korea as well, like Christianity is pretty. It's not fully, you know, it's
Yeah.
not widespread. As well as like because culturally Buddhism and Confucianism are kind of the way of the land. Um, it's sort of it's very contemporary. It's very new
Yeah.
for them
Her
to
story
remain
is filled with
Christians.
connections to Christianity though, and their schools. So that's really interesting
Hmm.
that they were kind of like in the minority in
Hmm.
that way. She was said to have been an extremely bright child. She could memorize Bible passages after hearing them only one time, which I find really impressive because I don't memorize that quickly.
Yeah, she was Sunday school
She-
valedictorian. Making us all look bad. Thanks, thanks, Kwanzun. So, also one thing that I should note is that so her first name is actually Kwanzun,
Monsoon.
and Ryu is actually her family name. It's her surname.
Oh.
But because in Korea, the way that we write names is last name first, and then so it's surname then given name is the way that Korean names are structured. So most of the time, like in when Koreans will refer to other Koreans, it'll be the same Korean structure with the last name first. But then in English, you would reverse the name, so her name would be
Kwansoon.
Kwansun
Okay, I'm
Ryu.
gonna call her Kwansoon and not Ryu.
Yeah,
Uh that was information. Why would every article listed it in the reverse? That's crazy. Every English article.
because because that's the thing where like the English translation it's correct because that's the way it's written in Korean, but in Korean we just write the last name first, and so it's like, oh, everyone's being, yeah,
Well,
anyways, her name's
I wish
Kwanzun.
the English speaking countries could get their shit together and just do it right, so I don't look like an idiot on this podcast.
Yeah.
um, so her father, obviously, and mother, I'm assuming, both raised her in Christianity, but they also instilled some of the Confucian values, and they were also like kind of civic minded. Like they were also people who were um very Korean proud. Like they were very proud of their heritage and their
Hmm.
culture, and they really instilled that in her. So
Hmm.
she really loved her country. When she was old enough, she went off. Well, she was encouraged by a local missionary who was around their hometown to go to this boarding school called I'm gonna get it wrong. Ilha Haktang.
Yeah, so it's
Ewa,
basically
Ewa
Ewa,
Haktang
Iwa, yeah, Haktan, Iwa
in
Haktan.
Seoul.
Yeah.
So they were like, oh, she's so smart, and you know what would be even better for her education would be to send her to Ewa Haktang. And it was this
It's basically, you could just basically call it
Iwa
Iwa
school.
Iwa school. Because Haktan
Iwa
is, yeah,
school.
Iwa. Iwa is basically um here's a bit of trivia. My mom
What?
went to this school.
Get
Yeah,
out!
my mom is yeah, my mother is a graduate of Iwa. It's a whole school
Yeah.
system now. Like it's grown into this beautiful, like gigantic, like educational stalwart. Like essentially, I would say they are, um, if Sarah
Mm,
Lawrence was still female only and was like, yeah, it's kind of, it's that
yeah.
sort of, they are considered to be an Ivy League women's university, high school and grades, like primary school system. They have like a whole
Wow.
thing.
Okay, audience, I
So
had no idea that Earl was
yeah,
literally connected
so
to the school.
yeah, so
You
Iwa is the school that my, yeah, Iwa is the Iwa Women's University is my mom's
alma
uh
mater.
lineage. Like she, yeah,
Yeah.
alma mater
Well,
from high
at this time
school
though, when
onward.
Kwansoon is going there, it's this is the first school. Like it was just created,
It's one of
and
the,
it was
yeah,
and
it's
at the beginning,
very,
from my
very new.
understanding, is that it was established by some American missionaries, and it was kind of the first
Hmm.
modern like education institution for women in Korea, because women
Yes.
generically there like
So
weren't a lot of schools for women. Women like weren't educated very much, which is
no,
common across the
no,
world in this time period.
no.
That's not a new fact,
Yeah,
but she was there
1900s.
kind of
Yeah.
at the beginning. Um, so,
Yep.
audience, I'm assuming that you know as little as I did about Korean history and what is going on at this time period. So around this time in Korea, and Earl's gonna totally probably chime in with way more information and better information. But at this time in Korea, Korea's, and it's the whole peninsula. It's not split into North and South Korea until the end of World War II. So
Yep.
it has come
One
at
nation
this time
state.
period when Kwansoon is alive. It has come under the illegal annexation of Japan. So in 1910, Japan like declares Korea under its rule and annexes it, like the U.S. did with Hawaii, which we've talked about on previous episodes. And
I mean, yeah. They basically just like rocked up and were like, "No,
yeah,
this is ours
they were
now."
like, no, it's ours now. And Japan literally aggressively starts to do its best to like eliminate, well, they say assimilate, but they
Yep.
mean eliminate Korean culture. So it renames Korea. It like gives Korea a new name. I'm not even going to say it because it
Mhm.
doesn't deserve any respect. And they were forcing people not to speak or write Korean, and Korean citizens were basically robbed of their freedom of speech and press and publication and assembly. And the
Yeah.
Japanese were like snapping up the land and taking it for themselves, stealing it from the Koreans. They were like, "Oh, you don't
Yeah.
have the
Property.
right, certificate of land ownership, so this is mine now." Where really it was the Japanese who
Yeah.
invented the certificates in the first place, and like it's all this insane bullshit,
Yeah.
right?
There's a lot of really unfortunate things that happened. But I think that kind of, that covers a large chunk of it. I think really the main thing to note is that, it's 1910,
Yeah.
you know. It's so wild to think that it's like, oh, colonialism and like all this stuff was happening back in the day. It's like it was the
No, it's 100
1800s,
that's
right? I was like, no, it
115
was
years ago.
1910.
It's not
Like
that fucking long
that's
ago.
100, yes. Yeah. And the really sort of the broader sort of understandings of it, my grandparents lived through it. My grandmother, my
Wow.
grandfather were alive, were children, and they were, going through this. They were born into a country that not not under anyone else's rule, and then they were a part of a
Yeah.
country that was. um
Fucking crazy.
they had, and you talked about it, they had their language taken away, they were renamed. It was illegal for
Your
Korean people
grandparents were
to
renamed?
speak Korean. Yeah, my
Oh my
grandparents were renamed,
god.
which is really a bizarre thing. Like they weren't, and they had their name, like their family had given them their name, they had, but essentially Japan was, yeah, sort of trying to erase all sorts of things. Like here's another thing that happened. Like Japan uh essentially destroyed a lot of historical and
Yes, I
archaeological
read that
artifacts
too.
that tied the original colonizers and people who migrated off of the landmass of the extension of Korea into Japan. Uh, they essentially tried to destroy a lot of
Ugh.
ancient burial sites, ancient archaeological digs, essentially that had cultures, essentially denoted that there was a culture shared between the two countries in a way, which
So
is really
weird
bizarre to think of.
and awful.
And but here's another thing, like in one of the things that the Japanese government also did, which is really wild, but essentially in order to it sounds really kind of woo woo, but to essentially break the spirit of Korea, they um they tried to destroy monuments or even like rock formations or natural
Yeah.
natural sites or beds that they believed to like either have like be concentrations of like good mystical
Yeah.
energy. Like they were like, blow it up, just blow it up.
Ugh.
Like, and you're
So
like,
awful.
wow, that's a really, I mean, and that's just sort of this really, it's a really aggressive type of a really really aggressive type of
Yeah.
colonialism.
Yeah, I mean it's not even unusual for that particular part of the continent because China does some of the same things,
Yeah,
in other
yeah, yeah, yeah,
places,
yeah, yeah,
we talked about like the time
absolutely.
when the original like, Mulan may have existed
Mm-hmm.
and like that the same thing was happening like
Mm-hmm.
her people were getting
Yeah,
cynicized, they say, for when China does it too. It still
yeah,
just blows my mind and breaks my heart though that like so many that you would just go in
yeah.
and say this doesn't exist anymore and
This is ours
you're
now.
Japanese
this
now
is
and
this is
everything
ours
that
now.
you
Yeah.
anyway.
You, your history is ours now, and so I think that's, and again it becomes even more difficult and nuanced because you know the evidence and record of these acts and these things are being recorded and kept by colonizers themselves. So it then just sort of think, the people that record, all the stuff that remains from this era has, there's a level of like, oh gosh, okay, well, we have to be really really vigilant about
Yeah,
making sure like what historically actually happened, as opposed to the narrative that the colonizer or the victor wanted to be
exactly. Exactly, because the
perpetrated.
colonizers almost always are writing the history books, and so much is lost in
Yeah,
all of that.
I mean, specifically in your Broad's case, I feel like that sort of ties in really appropriately, just because of
Yeah.
her story.
Yeah, so all of this is happening. So Kwansoon, the Japanese are they like come in and annex all of that shit happens when she's like 2 or 3 years old. So she has not really like as a kid, she's only known the annexed version, the Japanese annexed version of Korea, right?
Hmm.
But her family still had all their Korean pride and instilled that in her. So she goes off to this boarding school in Seoul, and she's getting educated the shit out of her, and I don't so there's a bunch of
She's
gaps in the
learning.
research, Earl, and maybe some of the filling of the gaps, because the only thing I know next is kind of the big thing that she does. But
Well, I mean, I think really what should be known is that at this point in time in the world, and this point in time in Korea, educating women, educating girls especially, was like, why would you do
yeah, why
that? Like,
bother, why spend the
it
time
was
on
seen as sort of
women?
this, yeah, it was sort of seen as this really like like, okay, sure, I guess if you want kind of thing, mainly because sort of Korea is a
Hmm.
Confucianist society. oftentimes the role of the woman was to be a good wife, a good
Right.
mother. The idea and ideal of who a woman should be was always sort of in context of her family and her husband
Mm-hmm.
and her children. Those were sort of the ways that women could exist in Korea and in sort of Confucian based societies at
Mm-hmm.
that point. And so um it was a huge, right at this point, it's sort of like she Yu Gwan-sun sort of is this, she's going through this phase where her tiny little brain is being blown
Yeah.
by all of these things that, generations of women before her weren't allowed to even think about, like
And
sort
with
of,
other
I
women
think,
too. So she's at
so
this girls'
I think,
school and she's with other
yeah, with
girls
other
her
women.
age and being taught by these ostensibly more progressive missionaries that were a little more forward thinking about women's
Hmm.
roles. And so she was just getting educated the shit out of her. And then we get to kind of the big part of the story here. So on March 1st, 1919, she's now 16 years old at this point. Her and 4 of her classmates go out to the streets to protest the Japanese occupation and military, and they declare Korea's independence. And they shout, Mansai. Is that right? Mansai? Mansei, which
Manse,
means long live
manse.
Korea. Is that right?
Manse. So literally, manse is means hands up. It's basically like you're saying, raise the roof. Like you're basically going woo. So and the idea is um 대한 독립 만세 is the phrase. So 대한
Oh,
독립 is like unified liberation. Like our unified
yeah.
Korean
Like free
liberation
Korea,
celebrate.
like
Like
a free. Uh,
yeah,
God, all these
yeah.
research documents all seem like garbage now when have a translator with me.
We got context.
But all these protesters
That's
come
what I'm here
together.
for.
People are already feeling protesty, I would say, and so they go out on the streets, and more people
Yeah.
join them, and they go to Pagoda Park, and they read aloud this new Declaration of Independence, which was written by Cho Nam-seon and signed by 33 Korean cultural and religious leaders. And the protest is so big that it develops kind of a really famous name, which is Samiljo. Is that right? Samiljo.
3일절.
I want to learn how to speak Korean now. It's so beautiful. So Samiljo
Mhm.
translates to 3-1 or March 1st, basically.
Yeah.
And if you think of like modern context, it's like Arab Spring kind of like, and these other protests that have happened recently that
Yeah.
kind of got so big that now they have a big name. That's kind of what's going on here. And the day
Yeah.
after the protest, some of the other protest organizers come to her at school and they're like, Gwan-sun, you and your friends should join up with us. We're going to do another big demonstration in a couple days. And Gwan-sun was like, hell yeah. Although she probably didn't swear. She was a good Christian, so maybe
Fired
she
up.
didn't swear. But heck yes,
Yes.
I will. And then on March 5th, 3 days later, her and her friends march at Namdaemun, which is a big gate in
Mhm.
central Seoul. And they are all
Mhm.
detained. The Japanese authorities come in and arrest them, but somehow the missionaries from the school like go in and they're like, no, 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 and they get them released. And for the moment, you're like, okay, all right. But the Japanese military and government authorities that were quote in power were very worried because these protests were very, very effective. And yeah,
They were
it
real
was like a
popular.
huge flurry of protest activity, and more people were joining every day
So
across the whole country as people started to find out about them.
one of the one of the things that I think needs to be noted about sort of the climate in Korea at this time, like you were essentially being policed on a daily basis. Like you couldn't speak Korean in public. People weren't allowed to interact with each other in public. There were also sort of like spies
Mm.
and people that worked for the Japanese government, essentially, that were keeping tabs and making sure people weren't speaking Korean or like communicating in Korean, that people weren't printing things in Korean
Yeah.
or writing in Korean. So then when
When
these
people
sort
started to
of
shout Korean,
a
it
lot,
was like a
because a lot
huge
of
fucking deal.
yeah, a lot of these demonstrations were like, they were coming out with printed material that was printed in Korea. They were coming out with, there were protest songs and marches and things happening in Korean. So it was based, there was a lot of, I think it it kind of opened the dam. Like it was both like the straw that broke the camel's back, but these protests basically sort of helped the rest of the country realize just how much everyone else was also ready for
Yeah,
things to
for
change.
sure. And so people started coming out across the country. People
Mhm.
start coming out and doing more protests. And the Japanese colonial government was like, "Oh, we got to shut this shit down." And so on March 10th, they order all schools across the country to be closed. So Gwan-sun has to go back home. So remember, she lives like 50 miles south of Seoul. But apparently, as she
Mhm.
goes, she's able to smuggle a copy of the Declaration of Independence with her. So she like shuffles that in her bag and she goes back home. Now, when she gets home, though,
The Korean
that's
Declaration
what
of
that's what I
Independence,
meant
not
because I had
this
just
is
talked about it. The Korean
no, I
Declaration of
know, I know.
Independence.
This is this does not turn into national treasure. I could just imagine it being like, and then Nicolas Cage shows up and it's on. How did this young Korean girl get a copy of the Declaration of Independence? I don't know. But Nicolas Cage shows up and they go through a
But it's like
series of
so it's a brand new document, anti-Japanese government, Korean independence, just printed. It's not even allowed to be printed because it's in Korean. So it's also
Yeah.
it's hella illegal to have
Yep.
that
It's
shit like
fresh.
in your bag. So
Yeah.
she gets it
Yep.
home though. And she gets home and she's more fired up than ever. She's like not even at all for a second deterred from all of her activities. So she gets her family fired up too. I'm sure they were like already mildly fired up.
Mhm.
She gets home, she's like, they shut down the schools, and they're all like, what the fuck? So they all start going door to door and village to village, and they start spreading the word about Samyeol, and they start rallying all of the local residents and nearby towns to organize their own protests. And they make like handmade tagayuki. Is that how you say it? They're little flags, little Korean flags.
태극 태극
Teguki.
태극기. 태국기.
Teguki.
So 국기 is 태국 국기 is
Uh-huh.
flag. It's the word for flag. And then it's essentially
Oh yeah.
the Korean flag.
I'll just say the little Korean flag since I'm bad at pronouncing that word. But they like hand make all these
Yeah.
little Korean flags and they're like handing them out and it's like a family activity. They're all kind of involved in all this together. And then her and her family
Mhm.
they start to organize like a big protest in their hometown on April 1st. And they're going to be protesting at the Aune marketplace in their hometown. And the night before the
Mhm.
rally, Gwan-sun goes up to the top of Mount Maebong and she lights a beacon on fire at the top to help like gather all the people they've been talking to the rally. And the next day, over 3,000 people in this little town show up for this rally. And
Mm.
I don't know the significance of this guy. I didn't look him up. Cho In-won read the Declaration of Independence out loud. I'm assuming he's another figure in the revolution. Um,
Mhm.
and Gwan-sun leads the crowd cheering for independence, and they're all waving their little flags, and the turnout's like fucking amazing. But the Japanese
Yeah.
military local branch are not having it. And they literally open fire on the peaceful protest. And they kill 19 people, including Gwan-sun's parents.
Yep.
A side note, we talked about how her dad had instilled all the civic values. Apparently, a total of 9 members of her family spanning 3 different generations are involved in this independence movement, which is just fucking awesome. And then also fucking tragic because then
Yeah.
now her parents are dead. So following the murder of her parents,
Yep.
she goes to the local Japanese authorities and she's like, what the fuck? That's a peaceful demonstration, y'all. And peaceful demonstrations should be allowed.
Oh, I mean, she was arrested as well.
And
We should
naturally, the police respond to her complaint by arresting her. And she is convicted of sedition, and she is sentenced to 3 years in prison. Apparently, one of the sources I had said that she was offered a lighter sentence if she admitted her guilt and helped to apprehend her collaborators, but she would not snitch,
Oh,
even when they started like beating her and
of
torturing
course.
her. The Japanese were extra pissed about all of it. And so, in extra retaliation to her and her complaints and her family and the protests, they burned down her family home. And apparently, her uncle, Young Moo, goes to the police and he carries the body of his dead brother and he protests as well. And they arrest him too. And he goes and serves 3 years in prisons for his actions. Fucking Japanese. This is a part of the story where we
Yep.
really dislike the Japanese. Apparently,
Well, or no, we dislike the Japanese. We
the
dislike the
colonial
colonial
Japanese of this time
Japanese and the
period.
colonial the colonial Japanese
Yes,
government.
of the time
We
period.
don't. We,
We're always we're hating on the colonizers here. The colonizers. Not every person who is Japanese. Not for even a second. So apparently, though, this type of response seems to have been kind of the common reaction of the Japanese military at the time. Um, Jun Kil Kim, who is the author of History of Korea, says that by the time these protests are eventually put down, which is like a few weeks after this big protest, an estimated 2 million people out of a population of 20 million had participated in these protests. And there were over 1,500 pro-independence marches, and more than 7,000 people had been killed and 46,000 had been jailed. So the military response was pretty across the board, not just in her hometown there.
yeah.
So Gwan-sun is sent to the infamous So-daemun prison. So-daemun prison
Sodaemun,
in
yeah.
Seoul. Even after she's in prison, she doesn't stop protesting. She's demanding the release of her other prisoners, and she keeps being she's very loud about her pro-Korean independence view. She shouts at her captors all the time. And then on the 1 year anniversary of the March 1 movement, they like throw this big large scale protest inside the prison.
Inside the prison.
And,
We're like, we don't need to be outside. We can do
but
it in
eventually
here.
the Japanese captors get a little bit sick of her and they transfer her to an underground cell. So she's isolated from everybody. And her beatings and torture kind of escalate. And they've been happening the whole time, we're sure. And then they continue to kind of escalate. So she's being beaten and tortured on a regular basis.
Yep. Also, just a quick note.
She's 16,
She's a
17 years
child.
old at this point, right?
This is a child
Yeah.
we're talking about.
And eventually on September 28th, 1920, Gwan-sun dies as a result of these horrific beatings and, of course, malnutrition, which is common in...
Date is
Oh, the
questionable.
date's questionable? Is that so?
Everything about her death is questionable. I don't know if you...
No. This is the perfect time to talk about it. I don't trust, obviously, like prison records in any context.
Yeah. So one of the big things about Yu Gwan-sun is that there's a lot of difficulty in because her teachers actually, I think, were the ones that tried to get her body back because they wanted to give her like a proper like funeral, like in the proper funerary way. And they also were worried that because she was a child and they knew she was being tortured, but essentially a lot because she's a child and she was connected to Westerners. The Japanese government officials, they were scared that oh God, if we get caught and they realize that this body's been tortured and this could, if these
So they like
Nice
held
white
on to
lady.
the
If these
corpse
nice
till
white
the
ladies
evidence kind
find
of
this out,
disappeared more of the beatings. Is that what the thought is?
find well, so that's partly it. The body that um her body was released to her teachers in like in a barrel or like an oil crate, I
Whoa.
believe.
This is not, it didn't show up in my research.
Like it was
Whoa.
like it yeah, it's like the body had was in basically was in a condition that like could there would not have been a way to determine just how much the extent of torture or something. There are all sorts of rumors back, like I know in the day, like they were talking about how like, oh, her body was cut
Ugh.
up into pieces, like, and completely dismembered. I think that was, I believe that was like sensational, like, but still, like there was a lot of uncertainty
Yeah.
around that, and it was very kind of uh
Well, because the
yeah
people who
um
gave the body over and the report of her death were the fucking
yeah,
captors.
it
Yeah.
was so shady,
So
and
she
they
was
were being so
17.
shady
She was
about it.
17 years old
But
supposedly though when she died. Before she died, I'll say,
yeah,
um, there's this great quote from her. She wrote from prison, "Japan will fall. And even if my fingernails are torn out, my nose and ears are ripped apart, and my legs are and arms are crushed, this physical pain does not compare to the pain of losing my nation. My only remorse is not being able to do more than dedicate my life to this country." Uh,
yeah,
I know,
Whew.
right? March 1st is now a national holiday. Um, do you
Yeah.
guys you still call it Samyeol, right?
That's how yeah, and you know the actual protests themselves are known as Hamil Undong. Undong is it's the Korean word for
Huh.
exercise, but it sort of means like it's like the day when the people were flexing their peopleness. I guess is sort of the best, but it's a like 독립 운동, like undong is sort of a word that gets used for a lot of like protests and movements, because
Yeah.
essentially
That makes
movement,
sense.
I
That
would
makes a
say,
sense as a translation.
is the more broad translation of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
um but yeah, so eventually Ryu Gansun had a funeral, her body was dressed, and she was buried. However, that cemetery was
Yeah.
destroyed.
Well, in 1962, in
Unfortunately.
1962, the Korean government posthumously awards her an Order of Merit for independence. Um, there is a museum at the Iwa
Iwa.
Museum
Yeah.
commemorates her life. They have like a little model classroom, like the kind of classroom that she was taught in, and they have like a bunch of
Yep.
um, items and photographs from not only her life but also the movement in general. And I found some of those pictures. I'm going to post them on the website too, listeners. So check them out. You can take a look at all of them.
Nice.
Um, in 2015, uh, an, a previous prime minister of Japan visited, and he acknowledged and apologized for all the crimes, which is one, you know, someone coming to apologize. It's like he says, "I am here today to offer
I
my
mean, it's
sincerest apologies from the bottom of my heart to those who were tortured and killed here." He specifically goes to the museum. Um,
mhm.
and then in
Yeah.
2015, United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon received a doctorate at Ewa, and in his speech, he honors Kwan-soon, and he compares her to Joan of Arc and said, quote, "I want to speak about a great young Korean woman who lost her own freedom so that others could be free. This is proof that violence can kill a person, but not their memory, not their ideals. Her patriotism demonstrates the great way she lived and died." And I thought that was a really nice quote. Uh, Obviously, much more happens. You know, Korea doesn't get its independence until World War II, and then lots of other drama happens that splits it in two, and there's
Mhm.
lots more to that story. But um, Gwansun for you is a huge part of it. So did I miss anything,
Yeah.
Earl? Do you feel like there's a part?
I mean, I think really, I think those are pretty much the main. I think the main, points you got. All, well done.
She's a fucking
She's
badass broad.
she was a She was a badass broad. She was a badass young
So
broad,
young,
and
just at the beginning of her
and
life, and
yeah,
I think like not to.
it's
I was just gonna say, like, I think one thing that stands out to me in the story, amongst so many other things, is the power of education, and how scared the Japanese were. Like, the first thing they do is close all the schools, and
yeah,
and how much that makes such a difference in the lives of all people, like to have a better knowledge of what lies outside of maybe the tiny confines of where they were born or where they grew up, and how else the world can be, and then
yeah,
what you can do with that power. I think this is amongst many other things in this story that just really stands out to me. Is like such an incredible. And your mom went to that school. Holy shit.
yeah. My mom is a
Ugh,
graduate of Iwa women's schools. If without them, I would not. I mean, honestly, without that school system, I would not be here. I would not be. I would probably not be alive. Like it did a lot of stuff. Like it's a really great school
yeah.
system, and then yeah,
And
it's
my life would have
it's
been way
it's really
worse without
incredible.
you, that's for sure.
Hey,
Well, thank you. Thank you, Earl,
so
for being here.
my I am proceeding in Ryugansu's legacy because without her we wouldn't be here, I guess, in so many ways.
For sure. For
But
sure.
yeah.
Thank you, Earl, for joining me for the story you already knew. And for
Yeah, of course.
fixing
Thanks
my
for
Korean
having me.
pronunciation.
Thanks for telling it. Yeah, thanks for telling it. It's so interesting because it's also like a thing where like this story I've known as a kid, like I've known since ever, sort of it's like it's been ingrained in me also because my mom is a graduate of UA
Makes
women's
sense.
schools. Like I feel like there's more connection to it that I know, but at the same time it's so great hearing about it from someone else and being able to like, yeah, it's just it's lovely. Thanks for
Well, thanks for being
sharing.
here. Thanks for being my guest. I'm so, so tickled that you are here.
Of course.
To learn more about Yu Gwan-sun, you can visit broadsyoushouldknow.com. We've got a bunch of awesome pictures of her and where she grew up and went to school. It's very cool. While you're on the website, you should click over to the About page and learn more about Earl, all his info and links to his work and his social media accounts. Speaking of social media, have you followed Broads You Should Know yet? We're on Instagram and Facebook at Broad You Should Know and Twitter at BYSK Podcast. To suggest a broad, fill out the form on our website, or you can email us at broadsyoushouldknow@gmail.com. Do you like us and do you want to help us? Then you should share us. And better yet, you should leave us a review on your podcasting platforms. That really helps other people who want to hear about awesome broads to find us. Broads You Should Know is hosted by me, Sarah Gorski. It is edited by Chloe Sky, with music by Darren Callahan. If the story of Yu Gwan-sun really inspired you, we have some other amazing teenage activists and sometimes martyr broads that we have covered. So you should also give a listen to Sophie Scholl, Malala, Greta Thunberg, Nakano Takeko, and Fama Mohammed. See you next week for another Broad You Should Know.